The house hadn't changed, but the people inside it had rewritten the story without me. The air smelled like cut grass and dryer sheets. The screen door creaked the same way it always had, like a familiar throat clearing before a difficult conversation. But my hands hesitated on the handle. 5 months of silence couldn't be undone by one awkward hug in a too-clean foyer. I was here because I had nowhere else left to go. That wasn't the same as coming home. Emily opened the door before I knocked. She was already dressed, makeup done, hair in curls that didn't look like hers. She smiled like she'd been practicing it all morning. I waited for the awkward hug. It came light and fast, her hands barely grazing my back before they retreated. "You look good," she said, stepping aside. "Thanks," I replied, meaning nothing. The hallway smelled like new paint. The walls were now a pale blue that made me feel like a guest in someone else's memory. My suitcase wheels rolled too loud across the hardwood. "I put your things in the guest room," Emily said, already halfway up the stairs. "The guest room," her voice came from over her shoulder. "We repainted yours. I wasn't sure you'd be back." 5 months ago, Nathan had texted me those 7 words, "Let's take some time to think." I hadn't replied. Not for lack of words, just no words that could compete with how final that message felt. I thought time apart might give us clarity, maybe even bring us back together. I didn't know then that while I was waiting for silence to become forgiveness, someone else had already stepped into my place. The guest room was spotless, like a hotel suite. There was no trace of me, not even in the closet. A neatly folded towel sat on the edge of the bed like an apology. I didn't unpack. Downstairs, the living room hummed with small talk and the clinking of coffee cups. Emily made tea and offered me sugar even though I hadn't taken sugar in years. Everything she said was safe. Weatherwork, Mom's new recipe for zucchini bread. Not once did she mention Nathan. "You're quiet," she finally said, setting her cup down a little too hard. "I'm tired," I lied. She nodded too fast. "Of course. It's a long drive." I flew. "Right." We sat in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't wait to be broken, it just stretches until it suffocates everything. The doorbell rang. Emily jumped up like she'd been saved. That must be Mrs. Jennings. The old neighbor smiled wide as Emily opened the door, then turned to me with kind eyes and a sharper tongue. "Claire, my goodness, back already. I just saw the photos from the wedding." Emily looked stunning. "I assume you helped pick the dress?" My spine stiffened. Emily's smile froze like a dropped vase caught midair. Mrs. Jennings didn't notice. She handed over a small package, candied pecans wrapped in gold ribbon, and patted my shoulder. "Well, congratulations to the newlyweds," she said cheerfully. "You girls deserve all the happiness in the world." I nodded like my head belonged to someone else. Emily walked Mrs. Jennings out, murmuring something about "thank you again" and "so sweet of you." The door closed gently, but I heard the tremble in her breath when she turned back. "I was going to tell you," she said, when my voice was quieter than I felt. She didn't answer. I went upstairs without a word. My room, the old one, was locked. The guest room waited, pristine and patient. I didn't sit down. I opened the drawers. Nothing personal. No notes. No clutter. The nightstand drawer held a Bible and a lavender sachet. I opened the bottom, one more out of habit than hope, and something slid forward, a photograph face down. I flipped it over. Nathan. Emily. Standing in front of a lighthouse, laughing, both wearing matching navy sweaters. His arm was around her waist the way it used to be around mine. My heart didn't pound. It sank. I didn't know where the next thought came from, but it pushed me to the closet. On the top shelf, between neatly stacked linen and a winter coat that wasn't mine, there was a white envelope. I knew Nathan's handwriting. I opened it. "Emily and Nathan, August 12, 2023. You are cordially invited." I stopped reading. The date was exactly 2 weeks ago. The ink hadn't even had time to fade. The silence from those 5 months suddenly made sense. The "let's take some time" wasn't a pause, it was a handoff. I had been benched without knowing it while someone else stepped onto the field with my life in her hands. I held the invitation until my fingers hurt. My sister married the man I was supposed to spend my life with, and no one thought to tell me. He wasn't rich. He just looked expensive enough to make you doubt your instincts. The living room felt staged like a waiting area for someone else's life. A blanket was folded with unsettling precision on the arm of the couch. Candles burned evenly in polished holders that matched the accent pillows. It was a showroom version of home, and I didn't recognize any of it. Emily moved in the kitchen with performative ease, humming softly as she chopped vegetables. The smell of garlic should have been comforting, but it just reminded me how many meals Nathan used to skip in favor of business dinners. Client schmoozing, he used to call it. Back then, it sounded important. Now it just sounded rehearsed. I sat in the armchair by the window, the one that used to be Dad's, watching my sister stir sauce with a wooden spoon she didn't seem to know how to hold. "Is that your marinara recipe?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Oh no. Nathan likes the store-bought one better. He says it's more efficient." Efficient. That was the word he'd use for everything from parking spots to people. I glanced toward the hallway and made an excuse to leave the room. "I'm going to look for a charger." I walked past the stairs and into the small office off the den, what Nathan had once claimed as his work-from-home zone. It still smelled faintly like his cologne. The desk was overly clean, the kind of clean that screams curated rather than lived in. On the glass surface sat a small leather holder with business cards. I picked one up. Nathan Ellery, Strategic Property Consultant. The next said, Nathan Ellery, Private Equity Advisor. The third, Nathan Ellery, Executive Director, Horizon Holdings. None of them had the same phone number. I flipped them over, half expecting to find a punchline. Instead, I found inconsistency. And that was worse. I pulled out my phone and opened LinkedIn. Nathan's profile loaded quickly, the usual headshot charcoal suit, blurred city skyline background, that knowing half smile he reserved for photos where he thought power looked sexy. But his job title, entrepreneur and consultant. No company listed. The employment history was thin with overlapping dates and vague language. Led high-value deals, provided strategic insight, partnered with international firms. All buzzwords, no substance. Emily walked in holding a glass of wine. She offered it to me like a peace treaty. "Dinner's almost ready. Just waiting on the pasta." I held up the business cards. "So, which job is the real one?" She blinked, then smiled like I was joking. "He wears a lot of hats. He's versatile. That's one way to put it." She sipped her wine too fast. "He just closed a big deal. 6 figures. With a real estate investment. Something with Miami. Or maybe Austin. I forget." She laughed too lightly. "Honestly, I just let him do his thing. I trust him." I nodded, but didn't say anything. Back in the kitchen, she served dinner like a hostess at a catered tasting. The pasta was undercooked. The conversation was thinner than the sauce. She mentioned their wedding, how it was small and meaningful, just close friends. No photographers. No need for extravagance when the love was real, she said. I nodded again. That's all I seemed capable of lately, nodding and pretending I was still part of the story. After dinner, Emily went upstairs to call Nathan. She offered me the family laptop to kill time. I didn't ask for it. I didn't refuse it either. The screen was already on minimized windows, blinking below the desktop wallpaper, a beach photo, probably their honeymoon. I clicked the Open Gmail tab. An email draft stared back at me. My hand hovered just long enough to convince myself it wasn't a violation if it was already open. The subject line, Capital One Platinum Application. Urgent. The form was half completed in autofill. The name at the top, Emily Ellery. Address, our families. Income, $120,000 annually. Employment, freelance consultant. That was a lie. Attached was a scanned signature, Emily's name carefully drawn. I knew her handwriting. I'd seen it on every birthday card since we were kids, every note she left taped to my door growing up. This wasn't hers. The signature was too smooth, too balanced. Not the slightly upward slant her ease always had. This looked forged, deliberate, practiced. My stomach tightened. Who signs their wife up for a credit card behind her back? Emily's signature was there. But I knew she didn't write it. It wasn't rage, it was silence. And in silence, truth echoes the loudest. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room that was never supposed to be mine. Fingers curled around the edge of the comforter, letting the hush of the house thicken around me. No one was shouting. No doors had slammed. But everything inside me was screaming. It didn't come as a scream, though it came as stillness. Nathan's face stared up at me from the photo I hadn't managed to throw away yet. His smile wasn't crooked, wasn't caught mid-laugh. It was polished, perfect. It was the face he wore when he wanted people to believe him. Back then, I had. Every time. I opened the drawer beside the bed and pulled out my old phone, half dead but still functional. It was the same phone I'd used when we were engaged. I hadn't charged it in months, but I needed something from before, some trace of what we used to be. Maybe to prove that I hadn't imagined it. I plugged it in, waited for the screen to flicker on. While it did, my mind drifted backward. The night he proposed, I wore a wine-colored dress Emily picked for me. I'd wanted something simpler, but she insisted. "Trust me," she'd said, tugging the zipper up with a grin that felt too wide now in hindsight. She even booked the restaurant. Said she had a feeling it would be special. I'd thought it was sweet at the time, sisterly. Now I wasn't so sure. I could still see the little rooftop patio, the string lights above us swaying in the evening breeze, and Nathan dropping to one knee with perfect timing, the ring box opening like a magician's trick. The applause from nearby tables. The camera flash, Emily's phone. She'd caught it all. I remembered how she looked that night, standing just behind the server holding her phone steady. The way she bit her lip, not in joy, but in restraint. Her eyes weren't on me. They were on him. The phone in my hand buzzed to life. I navigated to my photos, swiping through old memories that now felt like evidence. One from the engagement party right after the toast. Nathan had his arm around me, but he was looking at Emily. Not long enough to notice at the time, but now it jumped out like a secret begging to be seen. A different memory pushed itself to the surface, one I hadn't let myself unpack until now. It was late. I'd woken up to the glow of Nathan's phone on the nightstand, his face turned away from me. I reached for water and happened to glance at the screen. A name I didn't recognize, a string of emojis, a heart. He'd tucked the phone under the pillow before I could say anything. Work stuff, he'd muttered. I didn't press. I didn't want to be that fiancé. Suspicion felt like disloyalty, but now I realized the name was a decoy. The heart wasn't. The secret had never been far away. It had been living under our roof, sharing meals, smiling across the table. I tapped into old voicemails. Most were routine. Then I saw it unplayed, dated 3 months ago. Emily. My thumb hesitated over the play button. Then a shaky inhale echoed into the room. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "He said he loved you until he didn't." Silence. I blinked hard. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the weight behind those words. She sounded tired. Not triumphant, not even apologetic, just broken in a way that mirrored how I felt now. So, she hadn't planned it. Or was that just the story she told herself to sleep at night? I looked back at the photo of them on the dresser, the one from the lighthouse trip I hadn't even known they took. Her head tilted into him, his hand on her back. The space between them was gone, erased. Maybe they hadn't meant to. Maybe it started with late-night talks and too much wine. Maybe she felt sorry for him when we fought. Maybe she thought she was helping. But somewhere along the line, she'd made a choice. And choices have weight. If she didn't mean for this to happen, why did she say yes when he asked? The mask I helped him build now stares back at me. I click through the shared Dropbox folder with the same reverence as someone walking through a crime scene. Everything was intact. The folders, the color-coded file names, the smiling thumbnails frozen in time. Nothing had been deleted. Nathan was always careless with cleanup. A year ago, this folder felt like a monument to our future. Business plans, mock-ups, scanned receipts, logo sketches. At the time, I thought we were building something real, branding his ideas, solidifying his pitch deck, so he could finally land the kind of clients he said he deserved. I had done the work. He had done the posing. There it was again, Ellery Strategic. I clicked on the presentation. The fonts were slick, the language crisp. Positioning mid-tier assets for high-growth impact. I had written that line while sitting cross-legged on our apartment floor, half listening to a podcast about startup culture. He loved how it sounded. Said it made him feel like he belonged in rooms he'd never actually been invited to. Slide after slide, I saw my fingerprints. Every diagram, every line of text, every clean turn of phrase, mine. But the last time I'd opened this file, Nathan was still mine too. I opened the assets folder and saw a photo shoot we did one foggy morning. Nathan in a tailored blazer we couldn't afford, standing on the rooftop of a parking garage holding a fake briefing folder and pretending to check his phone. We'd laughed so hard after. He'd kissed my temple and said, "You make me look like the man I want to be." I thought that meant we were on the same side. Now I see what it really meant. I was the architect of the mask. I made it seamless. I clicked into another file, prenup post draft, claire.docx. The name alone made my stomach flip. I remembered this one. He had asked me casually if I thought it was romantic or tragic to write a prenup when you're not even married yet. I thought it was a joke. He said it was just an exercise in transparency in future-proofing. The document opened. It was filled with boilerplate clauses we pulled from the Internet disclosures: asset protection, intellectual property. Intellectual property. The phrase stared back at me. I scrolled down to where I had typed, "Any jointly developed business ideas remain co-owned unless explicitly reassigned in writing." We laughed about that line at the time. Now it felt like a confession buried in a contract no one signed. I backed out of the file and opened a folder labeled Speech Drafts. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. Curious, I clicked on the latest Word file, Wedding Toasts, final.docx. The first paragraph made my skin crawl. Love is not about who you were when you met. It's about who you believe you can become with the right person beside you. I had written that line in an anniversary card 2 years ago. I scrolled further, seeing sentence after sentence pulled directly from emails I had written to him. Messages I'd typed in quiet moments on buses, in late-night hotel rooms, during work trips when I missed him enough to think words could bridge distance. And now he'd said them. To Emily. He hadn't just taken my future, he'd taken my voice. From the hallway, I heard Emily's voice muffled from a phone call, cheerful, bright, oblivious. She passed by the door, not knowing what I was seeing. Or maybe she did. I opened the laptop camera and clicked record. My reflection appeared disheveled, tired, but not broken. Not anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I helped him craft every word I said, my voice steady. Every presentation. Every tagline. Every quote he ever used to make someone fall for him. I built the scaffolding and they just moved in. I leaned closer. They didn't just steal my future. They're living in a house I built. I stopped recording. The camera light went dark. My fingers hovered over the touchpad, the next step forming in the silence like fog lifting from a windshield. And now it's time to start taking it back, one lie at a time. She married him in the quietest ceremony, and yet the silence screamed the loudest. Emily poured tea like she was hosting a stranger. The soft clink of porcelain was too precise, her hands moving in slow, rehearsed rhythms. One sugar cube for herself, none for me. She knew I didn't take sugar. The detail made the distance sharper. The sun cut through the kitchen window at a hard angle, catching the edge of the granite countertop we once huddled around after school. But the warmth I remembered was gone, replaced by this tight-lipped choreography between sisters who no longer recognized each other. I know it must have been a shock, she said, eyes focused on her spoon. We didn't mean for it to happen like that. I didn't answer. I let the silence do the work. Eventually, it cracked her open. We didn't even have a real ceremony, Emily continued. No guests, just us, a city clerk. It was fast, but it felt romantic. Romantic. The word landed like a dropped plate. What date? I asked, my tone flat. She paused, blinked, then said, August 3rd, 12 days ago. I stared at her hands. There was a ring now, small gold, unimpressive. Nothing like the one Nathan gave me. I remembered our father's voice years ago over dinner, telling us people who rush to the altar often have something to hide at the altar. I reached for the folder sitting near her elbow. What's that? I asked. Oh, just some paperwork, she said. Marriage license, some tax forms Nathan wanted me to file. May I? She hesitated. Just long enough. Then she pushed the folder across the table. I opened it and scanned the first few pages: county clerk documents, a signed affidavit, a marriage certificate with a sloppy signature I recognized as Nathan's. And then, a deed transfer form. At first I thought it was a misprint. I looked again. Parcel number? Property address? Our parents' house? Transferring joint ownership? To Nathan M. Ellery. My fingers pressed harder into the paper. Emily, I said quietly, why is this here? She frowned. He said it was for taxes. Something about streamlining inheritance stuff. And you signed it? Yeah. During the dress fitting. I was in a rush. He had the notary on a Zoom call. Said it would save us thousands. I placed the folder down as gently as I could, but every movement felt sharp. You didn't read it. He told me what it was. He told you. She looked up. Finally really looked at me. There was confusion behind her eyes and something else, shame that hadn't found its name yet. You think he tricked me? She asked, voice trembling. I didn't answer her question. Not directly. Instead, I stared at the deed transfer, then back at the ring on her finger, then around the kitchen that still smelled like our childhood, but no longer felt like it belonged to either of us. He didn't just marry you, I said. He married this house. And he's already moved in. The words cut through her like cold water. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She reached for her tea, but her hands were shaking. I stood slowly, letting the chair scrape against the tile, and gathered the folder. I didn't ask her permission. She didn't stop me. As I stepped out of the kitchen, the hallway swallowed the sound of her silence. My pulse was steady now. My grief had calcified into something useful. I carried the folder upstairs like it was dynamite. The first lie had been sentimental, the second emotional. But this one was financial, which meant finally this mess was on paper, and paper could be traced. I set the folder down on the desk in the guest room, opened the file, and scanned for a lawyer's name, a notary stamp, anything I could verify. And then I whispered, almost to myself, almost like a promise. Let's see what else he's left behind. People think lies are spoken, but the worst ones are written and signed. The afternoon light came in sideways through the blinds, striping the wall like prison bars. Fitting, I thought. I was finally seeing the shape of my cell, except it had receipts, file folders, a dying laptop, and the sound of an old scanner slowly warming up after years of disuse. I had transformed my childhood bedroom into a war room. The pastel walls still held traces of who I used to be, dreamy, naive, sentimental. But the Claire, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through decades of family paperwork, was someone else entirely. someone sharper. I pulled the house deed to the center of the stack. Nathan's name, in bold. Emily's signature, real or forged, I still wasn't sure. I flipped to the back and marked the page with a yellow tab. Beside it, I placed the prenup draft, the fake business pitch deck, and the digital trail of speech notes Nathan had once stolen from my inbox. Together, they looked like the foundation of something rotten. I powered up an old external drive and started browsing archived emails. Nathan had once borrowed it to organize our joint documents. Translation Snoop copy cover tracks. I wasn't sure what he'd left behind. But he had left behind more than he realized. I found an email thread between him and a mortgage consultant, subject line, re-accelerated close, Martinez property. The broker's address was some barely functioning Gmail. The attachments were password protected, but the previews showed scanned IDs, loan estimates, wire transfer forms. The strangest part? My parents' address was listed in one of the headers. He was anchoring fake applications to a real address. Our address. A knock on the door startled me. I quickly closed the laptop. Emily peeked in, holding a laundry basket. "You've been up here all day." I needed space, I said, not looking at her. She hovered like she wanted to ask something but thought better of it. "Dinner soon?" I nodded. She left. The door clicked shut with more force than necessary. I reopened the laptop and pulled out my phone. There was one person I hadn't talked to in years, but her name had surfaced in my mind like an old song, Rosa Martinez. She had lived 2 blocks down. She'd also briefly dated Nathan. For 3 chaotic months, if memory served. I found her number in an archived contact list and hit call. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Claire Jennings. Her voice was cautious, suspicious. "You okay?" "That depends," I said. "Do you have a minute?" 10 minutes later, I was pacing the room as Rosa recounted how Nathan used to brag about closing deals using borrowed credit and favor signatures. She hadn't believed him at the time. She thought it was just male ego puffed up to impress her. But one thing stuck with her. He said verbatim, "You don't need to own anything if you can make people sign for you." I asked her if she ever saw him forge anything. No. But I saw him copy a signature once. On a napkin. Said he was practicing. My throat tightened. "Do you remember whose signature?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Emily. I think it was on a wedding invite or something." My stomach dropped. I thanked her and ended the call. A few minutes later, she texted me. Attachment IMG 4/2.jpg. A scan of a check signed in Emily's name, only the loops in the Y were wrong. It looked off. Found this in an old drawer. He cashed it at my bank once, she wrote. Said it was from his fiancé. $3,000. I enlarged the image. The handwriting was almost identical to Emily's, but it wasn't hers. I would have known. We'd grown up writing side by side at the kitchen table field trip forms, birthday cards, thank you notes. This signature had the same bones, but the hand behind it was someone pretending too hard. Nathan. I printed the image, added it to my stack, and labeled it forgery. $3K check. By now, the papers were spreading like roots, connecting threads of deception branching from one quiet manipulation to the next. A fake prenup here, a fake deal there. All of it surrounded by signatures that looked almost real. Almost. I sat back in my chair, letting the evidence stare up at me. It was no longer grief driving me. It was clarity. He didn't just betray us. He built a whole empire on our names. The thing about a man like Nathan is he only smiles when he's winning. It was one of those cafes that looked expensive without trying. Everything matte black and brass with a soundtrack of espresso machines and business jargon. Nathan liked places like this. He thought they made him look important. I slipped into a seat 2 tables behind him, pulling a scarf loosely around my neck. He didn't notice me. He was too busy talking. The man across from him looked young, 23 maybe. Clean blazer, nervous posture, nodding too much. Nathan was in full performance mode, leaning forward, sleeves rolled up, talking with the cadence of someone who'd watched too many TED Talks. I couldn't hear every word, but I didn't need to. The script hadn't changed. Residential pivot strong ROI, low risk initial injection. He was selling a fantasy. A waitress set my iced tea down and offered a smile. I gave her a quiet thank you, eyes still fixed on the back of Nathan's head. He tilted his chin as he gestured toward the tablet in front of him. Probably showing fake blueprints. Maybe the same pitch deck I helped design 3 years ago. My phone buzzed in my lap. Rosa, check your inbox, he lied about the car title too. I opened the email, a scan of DMV paperwork. Emily's name forged again. Nathan had refinanced her old car, drained the value, and rerouted the funds to a dummy LLC. Another knot in the web. Another lie on paper. But this wasn't the time to confront him, not directly. Not yet. I pulled out a clean napkin and jotted a message in small, sharp handwriting. He forged a deed. Call me. No name. Just a number. I waited until Nathan excused himself to take a call. He walked toward the door, phone pressed to his ear, the fake investor left alone with his latte. I stood, walked past, and as I did, slipped the folded napkin beneath the saucer. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was hot and unsteady. I moved toward the corner, waiting for the crosswalk light to change, heart ticking faster than I wanted it to. When Nathan returned to his table, I watched from the reflection in the cafe's glass window. He sat, resumed talking. The young investor lifted his cup, saw the napkin, and paused. Their conversation stopped. I turned and walked away. That night, Rosa called. Her voice held a note of disbelief and glee. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "The investor called Nathan, told him he's pulling out. Said something about fraud risk and legal complications." Nathan lost it. Screamed in the parking lot like a lunatic. I didn't smile. Not yet. "Did he say anything about seeing me?" I asked. There was a pause. "No, but..." He looked freaked out. Said something about being followed. Paranoid. I hung up and sat in the dark for a while. There was a quiet power in knowing I hadn't lifted a single voice or file in court, but something had shifted. I'd touched the first domino. Nathan had always smiled like someone in control. That charming, wide, almost rehearsed smile that made people sign checks, trust deals, surrender boundaries. But earlier today, as I walked past the cafe window, he'd looked up. Our eyes had met for no more than 2 seconds, and for the first time I saw panic in his eyes. The only thing more fragile than a lie is the man who tells it. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and stale anxiety. The clock ticked louder than usual, and the stacks of paper between us were taller than either of us wanted to admit. Emily sat across from me, arms crossed, tight, eyes red from a storm of crying that had passed, but not yet cleared. The laptop screen cast a blue glow across the table, illuminating what she could no longer pretend not to see. "Here," I said quietly, sliding a highlighted tax document toward her. "And this one. And that one." 3 pieces of paper. 3 signatures. All in her name. None written by her. She didn't touch them. Just stared. "I let him handle it," she finally whispered. "He told me financial stuff was boring and complicated, that I'd just get overwhelmed. So I let him. I thought that's what trust looked like." "Trust looks like giving someone your name," I said. "He turned it into a currency." She pressed her hands to her temples, elbows trembling. "How deep does this go?" I pulled a yellow legal pad closer and flipped it open. I'd started sketching it out the night before, a web of arrows and initials, dotted lines, and bank account numbers. Nathan was in the center like a spider. "This LLC," I pointed, "was used to transfer cash out of a joint account, one you didn't even know you had." She blinked. "How is that possible?" "He used your social security number," I said. "Opened it in Wyoming, where no one checks the real owner." The trail was almost invisible, but he left crumbs. She covered her mouth with both hands. "Why would he do that?" For control, I answered. And because he never planned to stay. My phone buzzed. A name flashed: Margaret Hill. I put her on speaker. I just finished reviewing the documents you sent, she said briskly. Your sister is listed as the primary contact for 3 business accounts she never created. 2 of them are shell corporations likely used to launder or redirect funds. And Claire, some of the forms he filed list your parents' home as corporate property. Emily went pale. Is that even legal? She asked. It's certainly not ethical, Margaret said. And depending on intent, it could be fraud. Or worse. Emily leaned back and stared at the ceiling like she might find an answer in the popcorn texture. I closed the call with a thank you and turned to her. She wasn't crying anymore. She was scared. And for the first time, angry. Claire, what if the wedding wasn't even real? Her voice cracked low and horrified. I never saw a certified license. He said he mailed it in. Do you want to find out? I asked. She nodded. No hesitation. Her phone buzzed beside her on the table. She picked it up, thumb hovering over the screen. Her expression darkened. I reached over. Let me see. One message. Nathan, stop asking questions. I'll handle it. I took the phone from her, gently opened the contact, and blocked the number. You don't need to hear from him again, I said. Emily looked down at her empty hands, then at the pile of lies, and finally at me. Something in her had shifted. She no longer looked like someone unraveling. She looked like someone stepping out of the ashes. I thought I lost my sister. But maybe, just maybe, I found her in the fire. He showed up in my driveway wearing a $500 suit and the desperation of a man whose empire was leaking from the seams. I saw him through the blinds before I heard the knock. He paced for a full minute like a man trying to decide whether to beg or bluff. The car he arrived in was shiny black, but with dealer tags. Rented. He hadn't even parked it straight. When I opened the door, I didn't speak. I just stepped back. Claire, he said, spreading his arms like this was some nostalgic reunion. God, it's good to see you. The cologne hit first. Too much of something expensive sprayed too heavy. A performance. I nodded to the living room. He walked in like he still owned airspace, but his shoulders betrayed him, rolled too far forward tight. The chill from outside stayed with him, hovering in the room like warning. I didn't expect you to answer, he said, sitting down carefully on the edge of the couch. But I figured, maybe it's time to clear a few things up. I sat opposite him, crossed my legs, waited. You probably have questions, he said, brushing invisible lint from his pants. About Emily. About me. Look, things moved fast, okay, but not for the reasons you think. I said nothing. He exhaled slowly, leaned forward. I didn't mean to hurt you. Still nothing. You always saw the best in me, Claire. That was the thing. You believed in me. When no one else did. He smiled. Almost. A crackling attempt at warmth. It slid off his face like wax. I know I messed up. I know I should have told you. But it wasn't planned. It just happened. And now everything's so out of control. He paused, eyes scanning me for softness. I blinked slowly. Nothing. I'm trying to fix it. He continued. The business stuff, the misunderstandings. If we could just sit down, maybe we could. I leaned forward, calm, deliberate, and placed a sealed manila folder on the coffee table between us. He glanced at it. Didn't touch it. What's that? Copies, I said. 3 forged signatures, 2 fraudulent transfers, 1 shared account Emily never approved. You can keep them if you'd like. I have the originals. The muscles around his jaw pulsed. I don't know what you think you've found, but this looks a lot like a setup, he said, voice lowering. It is, I said. Yours. Footsteps padded behind us. Emily appeared in the hallway barefoot, holding her phone like a shield. She froze when she saw him. "Emily," he said too quickly, standing up. "God, I've been trying to reach you. You're not answering my calls." "Look, whatever Claire's told you, I've seen the document," she interrupted. He took a step forward. "I never wanted it to be like this. You and me, we can still—" "You forged my name?" she said, voice trembling but upright. "You lied about everything." His voice sharpened. "I protected you. Everything I did for us. There is no us." "Nathan," I said quietly. "There's just you. And what you did." His face twisted, nostrils flaring. For a second, the mask slipped. The man beneath it was raw, ugly. "You think you can come after me?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea what you're risking?" "I've got friends' contacts. We've already spoken to a lawyer," I replied. "Her name's Margaret. She's very interested in your friends." The silence after that was longer than any scream. He looked at Emily again. She didn't flinch. That broke something in him. His hands clenched at his sides. He turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused but didn't look back. He left without closing the door. And that's when I knew he'd be back. But not as a man. As a threat. She signed the divorce papers like she was peeling off a borrowed identity. Emily's hand didn't shake. She didn't hesitate. The pen moved slowly, but the signature bloomed without a stutter. Across the glossy surface of Margaret Hill's conference table, I watched my sister finally cut herself loose. The law office smelled like lemon disinfectant and still air. The windows didn't open, the art was too generic, and the silence was too professional. It was perfect for what we were doing. Margaret sat at the head of the table, glasses perched low on her nose, flipping through legal documents with surgical precision. She was all bones and calm, the kind of woman who'd long ago traded fury for control. "There," Emily said, placing the pen down and pushing the folder forward. "It's done." "No," Margaret replied gently. "That's just the beginning." Emily leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. I could almost hear her exhale an entire season of regret. "There's more than enough here." Margaret continued adjusting her glasses to pursue fraud, identity theft, and financial manipulation. He forged documents. He created false LLCs. He used your name, Emily, and Claire's too. I straightened. Margaret opened a separate manila envelope and slid it toward me. I hesitated before opening it, something cold brushing the back of my neck. Inside were 4 sheets of paper, photocopies of a bank loan application signed 2 years ago, listing my name as co-signer. But the signature wasn't mine. It was close. Too close. Looped slants, even the rushed way I crossed my T. It looked like me, but it wasn't me. "He used me," I whispered. "I didn't even know about this account." "He used both of you," Margaret said. "He built an empire on borrowed names. If we file criminal charges, it could go federal." Emily's hands gripped the edge of the chair. "We're not pressing charges," I said, my voice calm. "Not yet." Margaret studied me over the top of her glasses. "Then, what exactly are you planning? I want him to feel what he made us feel." I said. "Cornered, exposed, powerless." Margaret didn't smile, but she closed the folder slowly like she approved. As we left, Emily paused at the reception desk. She looked different, not lighter, not yet, but maybe just more real. She walked ahead of me in silence until we reached the sidewalk. Outside, the wind felt cleaner, brisk. It peeled against our coats like truth. Back at the house, we sat on the porch, just the two of us. No words, just a soft, strange peace. The world hadn't shifted, but we had. I glanced at Emily. Her hair blew across her face, and she didn't bother to fix it. "I was never his wife," she said. "Not really." "No," I replied. "You were the costume he wore to look legitimate." She turned to me, eyes glassy but clear. "And you?" I opened the folder Margaret gave me and stared again at the forged signature. My name stolen, my trust fractured, My story hijacked. I loved the man I thought he was, I said. But he never loved anyone, not even himself. Emily pulled her knees to her chest. You still want to destroy him? No, I said. I want the truth to do it for me. She leaned her head against my shoulder. We didn't speak again for a long time. He didn't just use her. He used both of us. He married the idea of power and borrowed our names to buy it. Now that the truth is in writing, it's time to make it public. When the truth is finally yours, the first thing you want to do is clean everything it ever touched. The house smelled like dust and wood polish. Not bitter, not painful, just tired. I opened the windows even though it was October and the wind barged in like a guest overdue for years. It swept over the furniture, rustled papers, flared the curtains. It felt good. It felt like change. Emily stood in the hallway holding an old hoodie that still had Nathan's cologne on it. She didn't say anything, just stared at it, her mouth slightly open like she wasn't sure if she should cry, laugh, or gag. Then she stuffed it into a black trash bag and tied it tight. One down. We worked in silence, each in our corners. The bedroom first. Then the office. The garage. Every drawer was a memory I didn't need. Every shelf a lie we no longer owed our loyalty to. I found his laptop charger tangled behind a nightstand, his cufflinks rolled into a sock drawer, a self-help book he never read. Emily dumped them all into boxes labeled donate, but some things couldn't be passed on. Under a pile of old tax receipts, I found a beige envelope. Thin sealed. Curious, I opened it. A diploma. Nathan Walker, Executive MBA, Stanford University. Except the font was wrong. The seal was pixelated. And I remembered he'd never gone to Stanford. He went to a community college in Columbus for one semester before dropping out. He used this fake thing, this printed lie to get that consulting job with the Darlington firm. I held it up for Emily to see. I used to think he was smart, she said softly. Now I just think he's practiced. We didn't laugh. There was nothing funny about it. But there was a strange calm in the knowing. The mask had slipped, and it was ugly underneath, but at least it was real now. In the living room, the wedding photo sat on the mantel. Emily walked over without a word, pulled it from its frame, and opened the fireplace screen. The flames licked like they'd been waiting for it. She held the photo for a second longer, maybe to mourn, maybe to be sure, and then she let go. The picture curled, blackened, then vanished. Mr. Jennings showed up around noon with a bakery bag. He wore a thick sweater with 2 missing buttons and carried his warmth in his smile. About time this house felt like yours again, he said, handing me cinnamon rolls that smelled like childhood. Thank you, I said, meaning it for more than the food. He nodded toward Emily, who was now hauling a bin of old chargers and wires to the porch. She looks lighter. So do I said. We ate standing up in the kitchen, still surrounded by half-sealed boxes and trash bags. No one talked about Nathan. Not because we were afraid, but because we didn't need to. We were past it. The silence was different now. Cleansing, not oppressive. I wandered into the study, the one Nathan once used as his creative space. It still had the old desk we bought together at a flea market back when everything felt like possibility. I opened the bottom drawer, and there it was, a small red envelope with my handwriting on the front. Nathan, open when you need reminding. I had written it 2 years ago. I couldn't remember what I'd put inside, but I remembered the night I wrote it. He was going through something, he said, and I had poured every ounce of hope I had into that letter. He never opened it. I held it in my hands for a long moment. My own handwriting stared back at me like a ghost of the girl I used to be. Trusting. Romantic. Blind. I didn't cry. I didn't open it. I walked to the kitchen trash can and dropped it in. I threw it away without reading it. I already knew how it ended. Some doors don't close behind you. You have to repaint them so they forget who you used to be. The rental smelled like primer and old grief. Walls that had once held someone else's regrets now stood naked, waiting to be dressed in something new. Something of mine. The keys had been delivered in an envelope with my name printed neatly on top, like the place was welcoming me without judgment. That was new. A cracked hinge on the front door caught as I opened it for the 5th time. It creaked, tilted, resisted. I knelt beside it, screwdriver in hand, jaw tight with frustration. The wind carried the sound of a car pulling up tires, crunching against gravel, but I didn't look up. Need a hand? Adam's voice was like flannel, soft, warm, and dependable. I didn't respond right away. My hand tightened around the screwdriver. I twisted. Metal groaned. "Let me try first," I said without turning. "Sure," he said. No offense taken. Just air between us. He waited a few paces behind while I adjusted the plate. It didn't go easily. Nothing about this door wanted to cooperate, but I didn't stop. Not because I thought I could fix it better than him, but because I needed to. Eventually, I leaned back, blowing a strand of hair from my face. "Okay," I said. "Now you can help." He stepped forward, kneeling beside me. His movements were quiet, deliberate, like he knew this wasn't about the hinge. He didn't ask questions. Just handed me the screws when I needed them, held the door steady as I aligned the plate. We worked like that for 20 minutes. No small talk, no assumptions. Just shared space. After it was done, he stood and wiped his hands on his jeans. "So, red, huh?" he said, nodding toward the gallon of paint on the porch. "Yep. Most people go with white," he said, almost teasing. "You know, clean, fresh start." I shook the can. White says, "blank slate." Red says, "I bled, but I didn't break." His smile was small, but real. "That's strong." "No," I said, dipping the brush. "It's true." We painted in silence. The brush strokes became steady, almost meditative. Red filled the cracks and seams, bold and unapologetic. It wasn't the color of anger, it was the color of survival. I watched the old chipped wood drink in the color like it had been waiting for it all this time. After the second coat, we sat on the porch steps, arms dusted with paint flecks, watching the door dry. He reached for a bottle of water from his bag and handed it to me. I took it, grateful but quiet. The October breeze carried that clean scent of leaves and distant fireplaces. It felt like memory and possibility all at once. After a while, he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why did you let them do it to you?" I didn't flinch. I didn't get angry. I'd asked myself the same thing too many times to react now. I didn't. I said, setting the bottle down. "I just waited until they showed me who they were." He nodded slowly, looking out at the street. "That's heavy." "No," I said. "That's clarity." He stayed a little longer, then left without asking for anything, not a number, not a promise, not even a thank you. Just a nod, a look, and the understanding that sometimes presence is the only gift you need to bring. I sat alone on the step as the last of the sun bent around the edge of the building, casting long red shadows across the porch. The door gleamed behind me, unapologetic in its color. I didn't come here to start over. I came here to remember who I was before they rewrote me. The past doesn't haunt you unless you keep feeding it room and board. The last box sat like a stubborn guest in the corner of my living room, unopened, unwanted, but refusing to leave until acknowledged. I stared at it for hours, or maybe minutes. I couldn't tell anymore. Time felt thinner now, softer, less like a ticking clock, and more like a tide pulling me gently forward. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel lonely, just whole. The windows overlooked a line of rust-colored trees and a city street that had its own quiet rhythm. Leaves tapped against the glass like polite reminders of change. I took a breath, walked over and opened the box. Journals. Dozens of them. Some leather-bound, others soft and fraying. Pages with tea stains, angry pen strokes, doodles in the margins. My handwriting shifted across the years, tight and precise in my 20s, round and hopeful during the early Nathan years, sharp and guarded near the end. I picked up a blank one. New, crisp, waiting. I sat on the floor, legs crossed back, resting against the wall. The pen felt heavier than it should have. And then I began. Dear me, the one from before him. Before the lies, before the shiny ring, and the echoing silences. I know you don't see it yet, but you're about to give everything to someone who only ever saw you as a staircase. My hand trembled slightly, but I didn't stop. You will love so hard it will hurt to breathe. You'll forgive things no one should. You'll wait. You'll wait so long for a version of him that never existed. And when it all falls apart, you'll think it's because you weren't enough. The words came easier now. My chest ached, but not the way it used to. This wasn't breaking. This was the final unburdening. But here's the truth. You didn't fail. You paused. You paused your joy, your light, yourself for someone who dimmed every room he walked into unless he was the only one shining. A tear landed on the page, but it didn't smear the ink. It just dried and left a mark. A signature of release. The phone buzzed. Emily. I answered on the second ring. I got in, she said breathlessly. Night school starts next month. Business accounting. I smiled. You'll hate it. Probably, she laughed. But I'll understand what I'm signing next time. There was a pause. Then, thank you. You don't have to say that. I know, she said. But I want to. We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. The apology was already living in the spaces between our words. Forgiveness had arrived without a ceremony. I hung up, set the phone aside, and returned to the letter. I forgive you, I wrote to myself. Not because you were wrong, but because you were trying. And that matters. I flipped to the final page, wrote a single line slowly, deliberately. You didn't fail. You paused. Now press play again. I looked at the name I was about to sign. Not the short, softened version people used to make me smaller. Not the nickname he always liked because it sounded cuter. No. I signed it with my full name for the first time in years. Justice doesn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in conversations you're finally ready to have. The air in the park carried that in-between kind of chill, sharp enough to remind you summer had ended but not yet bitter. Leaves moved in slow spirals across the walking path. The fountain gurgled with an almost meditative rhythm. I walked without direction, hands in my coat pockets, steps even and slow. My phone buzzed once in my back pocket. Unknown number. I paused by the edge of the fountain. It was the kind of number you knew before you even answered. Not saved, not labeled, but unmistakably familiar in the way bad habits are. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't want to answer it, but I also didn't want to be afraid of it. I tapped, accept. At first, just breath. Then, you ruined me. I let the silence stretch. I'd learned its power. Nathan. I said, not asking. You know what they're saying about me now. The investor backed out. The mortgage fell through. They froze the accounts. I said nothing. Just listened. Let him fill the space with his unraveling. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. You loved me once. I loved a man I invented, I replied. You were just good at wearing him, he scoffed. You think this makes you righteous? No, I said. Just clean. You think you're better than me? No. Just done. His voice cracked. I gave you everything. No, I cut in gently. You borrowed everything. And now the payments are due. A pause. Then quieter, almost a whisper. You were always the smart one. I should have picked you. That's the thing, I said. You did. And then you broke it. Silence. Then a sigh so long it almost sounded like wind. Look, he said, the edge slipping into something that tried to be soft, rehearsed. You and I, we don't have to hate each other. We could meet. Just talk. I'm still me. You're still? I pressed the side button. The call ended. The silence that followed was heavier than his words had been, but not in a way that hurt. It was the final weight settling before lifting for good. I opened my contacts, scrolled to Nathan Old, the last remnant of a version I'd held onto longer than I should have. It was never about rage, it was about finally being done. Block, delete, no ceremony, just freedom. I exhaled into the crisp air, tilted my face toward the half-gray sky. A few leaves skittered past my boots. I didn't feel victorious. I felt available, like a part of me had finally returned from war. The phone was still in my hand, the screen blank now, waiting. And just like that, I made room for someone else to call. They say the internet never forgets. But healing is what you do offline. I lit the candles not because I needed the light, but because I liked the way their flickering slowed the room down. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and toasted bread, and the windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside fighting the early November chill outside. The kitchen table was too small for a real dinner party, but big enough for this. Emily brought apple cider in an oversized thermos and announced divorced woman in her 20s, reporting for duty. I raised my mug and clinked it against hers. She had the kind of laugh tonight that didn't check the room first. Adam showed up with a book instead of wine. Something obscure and probably dense. I figured you'd already stocked the fridge, he said. So I brought something you wouldn't buy yourself. I didn't ask if it was a gift or a recommendation. I just smiled and made room on the side table next to a pile of journals and a forgotten paintbrush. We were halfway through slices of pumpkin bread when there was a soft knock on the door. No one expected it. I opened it to find a cardboard box sitting on the mat, still warm. Taped to the top, a handwritten note. This one's just for you this time, Mr. Jennings. Inside a pie. Apple, of course. I didn't cry, but my chest felt like it took a breath it had been holding for months. Later, as the night stretched thin and laughter turned into the quieter rhythm of full bellies and comfortable silences, I curled up on the armchair with my phone. A reflex more than a need. I wasn't searching, just observing. Nathan had posted again. Something filtered distant. A photo from a rooftop in Miami captioned with some hollow quote about resilience. I stared at it for a moment. Not long. I didn't feel the jolt anymore. Just a faint, almost academic curiosity. Like looking at a stranger who vaguely resembled someone you once knew. My thumb hovered over the screen. Not to block him. Not even to report. Just to scroll past. In my camera roll, I noticed something for the first time. There wasn't a single photo of him left. No dramatic purge. No bonfire session. Just a quiet erosion over time. A natural fading. I hadn't meant to delete them. They had just stopped being worth keeping. Emily was curled up under a throw blanket. Adam was washing a mug without asking. The pie was half gone. The music was soft acoustic, something about November rain and second chances. I thought about posting a photo. A candid of the table. Maybe a blurry shot of the pie. But I didn't. Instead, I let the moment stay where it was, in the room, in the air, in the stillness of something finally, truly over. If I ever tell this story, I'll start with the part where I finally stopped apologizing for being right. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together.